My husband's sons gave me 30 days to leave my own home and demanded every dollar he left behind. I smiled, signed the papers, and gave them exactly what they wanted, until their lawyer read one sentence and went completely pale. After Floyd Whitaker died, his 2 sons demanded the house, the lake property, the business, and every account they believed carried their family name. Colleen's attorney begged her to fight. Instead, she looked across the conference table and said, "Give them exactly what they asked for." Sydney smiled first. Edwin followed. Their lawyer lowered his eyes to the transfer papers, confident that the grieving widow had surrendered. Then he reached one sentence near the bottom of the page. He stopped. The color drained from his face. His hand tightened around the document, and the room went so quiet that Colleen could hear the hum of the air conditioner. That was when the sons realized the inheritance they had fought so hard to claim was not what they thought it was. Before I tell you what that sentence said, subscribe to the channel and stay with me until the end, because this story is not only about money. It is about what happens when people mistake grief for weakness, kindness for ignorance, and family loyalty for permission to destroy someone's life. Welcome to When Family Breaks One. I have always been drawn to the moment a family stops behaving like a family and begins treating love as leverage. In Colleen's case, that moment arrived before the funeral flowers had begun to wilt. 3 days after Floyd's burial, Colleen sat alone in his leather chair in the office they had shared for more than 2 decades. The room still looked as if he might return. His reading glasses rested beside a stack of papers. A silver pen lay near the telephone. On the corner of the desk stood a photograph from their wedding day, both of them laughing at something she could no longer remember. 22 years of marriage, and now the house felt less like a home than a place holding its breath. Sydney stood across from her in a tailored suit. He had inherited his father's height and commanding presence, but none of his warmth. His gray eyes moved through the room with the precision of a man evaluating property that would soon belong to him. Edwin stood beside him. He was 3 years younger and softer in appearance, but Colleen had learned that his gentle tone could carry the same cruelty as Sydney's bluntness. Sydney pushed. Edwin persuaded. One used authority. The other used concern. "Colleen," Sydney began, "we need to discuss some practical matters." Practical matters. Floyd had been in the ground for 72 hours. "What kind of matters?" she asked. The brothers exchanged a look. It was brief, but practiced. A private language, the kind of look that told everyone else in the room they were already outside the circle. "The estate," Sydney said. "Dad's properties, business interests, and accounts. We need to clarify how everything will be distributed." Colleen placed both hands on the arms of Floyd's chair. The leather had been worn smooth beneath his palms, and that familiar texture was the only thing keeping her steady. "Your father told me everything was arranged." "It was," Edwin said, lowering his voice, "but perhaps not in the way you understood." Sydney opened a thick folder and laid several documents on the desk. He explained that the Sacramento home would pass to him and Edwin. The Lake Tahoe property would also go to them. The business assets would be divided between the brothers. He spoke as if reading an inventory. The house, the villa, the company. The future Colleen and Floyd had planned together. Each item was taken from her with the calm efficiency of a clerk removing furniture from an empty building. "And what happens to me?" she asked. Sydney did not hesitate. "There is a life insurance policy, approximately $200,000, that should allow you to establish a modest life elsewhere." Elsewhere. Colleen looked toward the window overlooking the garden she and Floyd had planted together. She remembered kneeling beside him in the soil, arguing over where the roses should go. She remembered Christmas dinners, anniversary breakfasts, and mornings when they discussed growing old in that house. Now his son was telling her that it belonged to the bloodline, as though her 22 years there had been a temporary visit. Then Sydney pulled out another document. "There are outstanding medical expenses from Dad's illness. The unpaid amount is approximately $180,000. Colleen felt the air leave her lungs. "Why would those bills be mine?" "You were his wife," Edwin replied. You were involved in treatment decisions. We have been told that some responsibility may fall to you. $200,000 in insurance, $180,000 in medical debt. They were offering Colleen $20,000 to rebuild her life. This is where I began to understand the cruelty of their strategy. They were not merely trying to take property. They were trying to overwhelm her with numbers, deadlines, and legal language until surrender felt safer than asking questions. That is how manipulation enters a grieving household. Not through shouting, but through calm voices. Not through obvious threats, but through official-looking folders and people insisting there is no other option. Surely the estate pays its debts before assets are distributed, Colleen said. Sydney's expression remained composed. The matter is complicated. Complicated is a useful word when someone does not want you to look too closely. How long do I have to leave? She asked. We believe 30 days is reasonable. 30 days? To relocate, Edwin said. We are not trying to be cruel. People who say that usually know exactly how cruel they are being. We believe the family assets should remain in the bloodline, he continued. Bloodline. One word erased 22 years of marriage, caregiving, sacrifice, and loyalty. Colleen had sat beside Floyd through every hospital night. Sydney had flown in twice during the final 3 months. Edwin had visited once. Yet they now stood in her home and spoke as though biology had done more for Floyd than devotion ever had. Sydney gathered the documents. Take some time to absorb this, but the 30-day period begins tomorrow. They left her alone in the office. Through the window, Colleen watched them stop beside Sydney's car. Edwin laughed. Sydney pointed toward the house, already imagining renovations, sales, or division. They were celebrating before the widow had even begun packing. For several minutes, Colleen allowed the fear to settle over her. Homeless, almost broke, alone. Then her hand touched the narrow drawer beneath Floyd's desk. Inside were old receipts, business cards, spare cufflinks, and beneath them, something cold and metallic, a small brass key. Colleen held it beneath the desk lamp. It had no label, no tag, and no obvious purpose. She had never seen it before, but Floyd had hidden it in the most private drawer in the room, beneath things no one else would examine. And Floyd never did anything without a reason. Outside, Sydney's car disappeared at the end of the street. The brothers believed they had won. What they did not know was that Floyd had left behind one final secret, and the key in Colleen's hand was about to open far more than a locked box. The brass key did not tell Colleen what Floyd had hidden, but it gave her something Sydney and Edwin had failed to account for, a reason not to surrender before she understood the truth. The next morning, Colleen sat across from Martin Morrison in his downtown Sacramento office. Martin had handled Floyd's legal affairs for nearly 15 years, and until that day, she had trusted the certainty in his voice. Yet when she told him she was considering giving Sydney and Edwin everything they wanted, his composure vanished. "You cannot be serious," he said. "I am. Colleen, the will may be challenged. There are irregularities. The language does not sound like Floyd, and the timing raises questions." She looked toward the windows behind him. How long would a challenge take? Months? Possibly years. And while that happens, where do I live? We could ask the court to preserve your right to remain in the house. Could you guarantee it? Martin hesitated. That hesitation answered her. What about the medical debt? She asked. Could you guarantee that no one would come after me while the estate is tied up? No attorney can guarantee what creditors may do, but we would contest it. Colleen folded her hands in her lap. She had spent the night reading the documents Sydney left behind. The language was cold, technical, and impersonal. 22 years of marriage had been reduced to phrases such as adequate provision and separate distribution. Nothing in those pages sounded like Floyd. That should have made her eager to fight, but the thought of years spent in courtrooms, depositions, and hostile meetings filled her with another kind of fear. Even if I win, she said quietly, what will be left of me? Martin leaned forward. You will still have your rights. I am asking what I will have left of my life. He did not respond. I understand why Martin resisted her. From the outside, Colleen's decision looked irrational. A grieving widow was prepared to surrender valuable assets to two men who had shown her no mercy. But there is a difference between giving up and refusing to fight on someone else's terms. Sydney and Edwin expected panic. They expected anger, tears, and a desperate court battle. A public fight would allow them to control the pace, the paperwork, and the narrative. Colleen did not yet know what the key opened, but she recognized that revealing her suspicion too early might destroy the only advantage she had. "What exactly would I sign away?" she asked. Martin removed his glasses. "Claims to the Sacramento residence, the Lake Tahoe property, the business interests, and any estate assets governed by the document they presented. You would retain the insurance payment and property that was clearly yours before the marriage. And the medical bills? I would insist that the estate resolve them before any final transfer. I would also demand a release protecting you from future estate-related claims." How quickly could it be done? A week? Perhaps 2? "Prepare the papers." Martin stared at her. "I believe this could be the greatest mistake of your life." "Then make sure I understand every line before I sign." For a moment, something shifted in his expression. He still thought she was wrong, but he no longer seemed certain she was confused. Before either spoke again, Colleen's phone vibrated. The message was from Sydney. "Mother, Edwin and I appreciate your cooperation. We would like to finalize everything before the end of the week so the family can begin moving forward." She read the message twice. Mother. During Floyd's illness, Sydney had rarely used the word. Now that he needed a signature, he used it like a key of his own. Martin held out his hand, and Colleen passed him the phone. "They are rushing you," he said. "I know. That should tell you something." "It does." "Then why are you helping them?" She returned the phone to her purse, where the brass key rested against the lining. "Because people reveal more when they believe resistance is over." Martin watched her carefully, but she said nothing else. That afternoon, Colleen searched the house. She tested the key on every lock she could find. The cabinet in the garage, the antique writing desk upstairs, the small safe in the bedroom closet, the storage chest beneath the stairs. Nothing fit. As evening became night, the search grew less methodical and more desperate. She opened boxes she had not touched in years. She sorted through tax records, business cards, photographs, and receipts from trips she barely remembered. With each failed lock, doubt returned. Perhaps the key was meaningless. Perhaps Floyd had forgotten it existed. Perhaps she was building hope around a piece of metal because the alternative was admitting that the man she loved had left her defenseless. That thought cut deeper than Sydney's threats. It was one thing to believe Floyd's sons had betrayed her. It was another to wonder whether Floyd had failed her too. Near midnight, Colleen sat on the bedroom floor, surrounded by the remains of a shared life. She found a hotel receipt from their 10th anniversary, a grocery list in Floyd's handwriting, and a photograph of him asleep with a book open on his chest. Grief has a strange way of making ordinary objects unbearable. A person can survive a funeral and still be undone by a note reminding them to buy coffee. Colleen pressed the photograph to her chest, then forced herself to keep searching. The next morning, she opened the plastic belongings bag the hospital had returned after Floyd's death. Inside were his watch, wedding ring, eyeglasses, and wallet. Behind his driver's license, she found a business card from First National Bank on J Street. On the back, Floyd had written one number. Her pulse quickened. Less than an hour later, she stood in the bank lobby with the key in her palm. The branch manager, a woman named Patricia, recognized Floyd's name immediately. "I am sorry for your loss, Mrs. Whitaker," she said. "Your husband was always precise about his instructions." "Did he keep a box here?" Patricia examined the card and key. "Yes, box 379. "Who had access?" "You and your husband, no one else." "When was it opened?" "Approximately 6 months ago." 6 months earlier, Floyd's health had begun to decline. It was also when Sydney and Edwin became more attentive, asking questions about property, accounts, and business records. Patricia led Colleen through a secured door and down into the vault. The air felt cooler there, and every sound seemed sharp. The click of locks, the scrape of metal, the echo of footsteps. Box 379 was larger than Colleen expected. Patricia placed it on a table inside a private viewing room and left. For several seconds, Colleen stood without touching it. What frightened her was not that the box might contain nothing. It was that it might contain proof that Floyd had lived a secret life she had never understood. She inserted the key. The lock turned smoothly. Inside were documents, printed emails, financial statements, medical reports, property records, photographs taken from a distance, and a thick folder marked Private Investigation. Confidential. On top rested a sealed envelope in Floyd's handwriting. For Colleen. Open only after reading everything else. Her hands trembled as she set the envelope aside. Then she lifted the first printed email. The sender was Sydney. Dad is getting worse. We may have less time than expected. We need to accelerate the transfer before Colleen starts asking questions. The reply appeared beneath it. The documents are prepared. Once the signatures are secured, the assets can be redirected. Your stepmother should not be difficult. She does not understand the financial side. Colleen read the exchange again, slower this time. Sydney and Edwin had not begun planning after their father died. They had been planning while Colleen was still sitting beside his hospital bed. And as she reached for the next page, she understood that the key had not opened a box of money. It had opened the truth about her family. The box had opened the truth about her family, and now every page inside it would strip away another lie. The next document was a bank statement for an account Colleen had never seen before, Whitaker Holdings, LLC. The balance was $4.7 million. Floyd had written, "Colleen, this is our real savings. The boys believe most of the money is tied up in the house and the business. I moved it where they could not reach it." Sydney had told her that $200,000 should be enough to rebuild her life. He had said it with the casual authority of someone deciding what another person deserved. Yet Floyd had quietly protected millions. Colleen did not feel rich. She felt exposed. She opened the folder marked Private Investigation. The first section concerned Sydney. There were photographs of him entering casinos in Reno, financial summaries, loan records, and reports documenting repeated trips unrelated to his law practice. Sydney owed roughly $230,000 connected to gambling and high-risk borrowing. Then Colleen found copies of loan papers bearing Floyd's signature. A note from the investigator questioned whether those signatures were genuine. The son, who spoke so proudly about preserving his father's legacy, had apparently been using that legacy as collateral before Floyd was even gone. The second section concerned Edwin. His consulting business had become a maze of failed ventures, shell companies, and client funds moved without clear authorization. Nearly $300,000 belonging to other people had been lost or diverted. Some of those clients were elderly. They had trusted Edwin with retirement money. That detail changed something in Colleen. Until then, part of her had wanted to believe the brothers' cruelty came from grief or panic. But these records showed a broader pattern. They had learned to treat trust as something to extract. I think this is one of the hardest truths in stories like this. We search for the moment a person became dishonest because one dramatic moment feels easier to understand. But sometimes there is only a series of small choices, each one justified, until exploiting another person feels normal. Colleen turned to the medical documents. A neurological report, completed 3 months before Floyd's death, stated that he showed no signs of cognitive impairment. His judgment remained intact. He understood complex legal and financial decisions. Someone had expected his sons to question his mental capacity. Floyd had created proof before they could create doubt. Then Colleen found another will. It was dated 6 weeks before Floyd's death. Unlike the document Sydney had shown her, this version left control of the estate to Colleen. Sydney and Edwin were mentioned, but the final decision regarding anything they received belonged entirely to her. In the margin, Floyd had written, "Original held by Mitchell and Associates," not Morrison Firm. There had been 2 wills. The brothers were using an older one. The final version was protected by an attorney she had never met. Only then did she open the envelope. "My dearest Colleen, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the boys have shown you who they have become." Her hands began to tremble. Floyd explained that his suspicions started when Sydney and Edwin suddenly became attentive during his illness. They asked about deeds, business ownership, passwords, and insurance. At first, he wanted to believe they were frightened of losing him. Then he discovered irregular documents and hired a private investigator. The more he learned, the more carefully he moved money, revised his plans, and separated the records from anyone his sons might influence. The letter continued. "The boys believe they are inheriting the house and the lake property. What they do not know is that I refinanced both. The Sacramento home carried approximately $1.2 million in debt. The Lake Tahoe property carried another $800,000. The money from those loans had been transferred into protected accounts. Sydney and Edwin believed they were demanding valuable assets. They were actually demanding obligations worth more than the properties themselves. Floyd had built a poison pill and wrapped it in the language of inheritance. The insurance policy was also larger than the brothers claimed. Combined with another policy they did not know existed, Colleen would receive approximately $800,000. But the money was not what broke her. It was the final paragraph. "I could have turned everything over while I was alive," Floyd wrote. "But I wanted the final decision to belong to you. They made their choices. You must decide what those choices deserve. Build a life that belongs to you. Do not spend the years you have left asking permission to be safe. Love always, Floyd." Colleen pressed the letter against her chest. For days, she had wondered whether the man she loved had abandoned her. Now she understood that he had spent his final strength protecting her. Relief came with anger, grief for the conversations they never had, and the terrifying knowledge that Floyd had left her not only wealth, but power over his son's future. That is where this story became more complicated for me. It would be easy to say Colleen now had everything she needed for revenge. But evidence does not automatically tell a person what justice should look like. Having the power to destroy someone and knowing whether you should use it are two different things. That evening, Edwin invited her to dinner. "Bianca and I thought it would be good to spend some family time together before everything is finalized." Family time. Colleen agreed. Their home in Granite Bay was a monument to borrowed success. Luxury cars stood in the circular driveway. Bianca wore a designer dress and greeted Colleen with rehearsed concern. Sydney was already there, holding a glass of expensive scotch. "Mother," he said, giving her a brief hug. "You look better." The day before, he had given her 30 days to leave her home. Dinner was served in a formal room filled with polished silver, fine china, and expensive wine. Every detail suggested stability. Now that Colleen knew the truth, all she could see was pressure hidden beneath decoration. "So," Sydney said, "Martin tells us you are ready to move forward. I have decided I do not want to spend the rest of my life fighting Floyd's children." Relief crossed Edwin's face. "That is wonderful. Dad would be proud." Floyd would certainly have been interested. Bianca reached toward a folder on the sideboard. "We prepared a few additional documents to make everything easier." Colleen did not touch them. "There is one matter I would like clarified first." "The medical bills," she said. "I would like an itemized statement from the hospital." "That is not necessary," Edwin replied too quickly. "I already reviewed everything." "I am sure you did, but Floyd was careful about insurance. It seems strange that he never mentioned such a large, unpaid balance." The room went still. "Insurance does not cover everything," Sydney said. "Then the statement should make that clear." Bianca stood abruptly and announced dessert. As she left, Sydney and Edwin exchanged the same private look Colleen had seen in Floyd's office. Only now she could read it. Fear. A few minutes later, Colleen casually mentioned sorting through Floyd's records. "What records?" Edwin asked. "Bank statements. Company papers. Accounts I do not recognize." Sydney leaned forward. "You should bring those to us. Legal documents can be confusing." "That is thoughtful. It is what family does." "Of course." Colleen took a sip of water. "I also found a key." Neither brother moved. "A key to what?" Sydney asked. "A safety deposit box. The color left Edwin's face. "Did you open it?" Colleen looked at him. "Why?" "I only mean banks have complicated procedures." I managed. For the rest of the meal, no one ate much. When Colleen left, Sydney asked her to bring the documents to their next meeting. "Family should help family," she said. In the rearview mirror, she saw him standing in the driveway with his phone already pressed to his ear. Before she reached home, her own phone rang. The caller introduced himself as James Mitchell of Mitchell and Associates. "Mrs. Whitaker, your husband left specific instructions. If you accessed the safety deposit box, I was to contact you immediately. I found the will. You found a copy. My office holds the original." Colleen sat down in Floyd's chair. "There is more, isn't there?" "Yes." "What kind of more?" "The kind that changes who controls the estate, what your husband intended, and what his sons may face if their conduct is examined." He paused. "Do not sign anything, Mrs. Whitaker. By tomorrow afternoon, everything about your position will be different." By tomorrow afternoon, everything about Colleen's position would be different, and for the first time since Floyd's death, she began to believe that the truth might be stronger than the fear his sons had built around her. James Mitchell's office was nothing like Martin Morrison's polished suite overlooking the river. It occupied the second floor of a modest building in Midtown Sacramento, above a bookstore and beside a small cafe. There were no marble floors, no glass conference walls, and no carefully framed photographs of powerful clients. Yet Colleen felt safer there than she had anywhere since the funeral. Mitchell was a soft-spoken man in his early 60s. His office looked crowded, but purposeful, filled with folders, legal pads, and documents marked with handwritten notes. He did not greet Colleen with exaggerated sympathy or rush to reassure her. He simply invited her to sit and placed a thick file between them. "Your husband was one of the most careful people I have ever represented," he said. He understood that what he was preparing would be painful, but he believed it was necessary. "Why didn't he tell me?" "Because he was afraid the information would reach his sons before everything was protected." The answer hurt, even though Colleen understood it. Floyd had trusted her, but he had also carried the burden alone. While she had been managing medications and hospital appointments, he had been investigating his own children and preparing for the possibility that they would betray her after his death. Mitchell opened the file. The final will had been properly executed 6 weeks before Floyd died. 2 witnesses had signed it. A separate physician had evaluated Floyd's mental capacity. The original remained secured in Mitchell's office. "There is no legitimate question that your husband understood what he was doing," Mitchell explained. "The earlier will Sydney and Edwin showed you was replaced." "And Martin Morrison?" Floyd ended that firm's involvement after becoming concerned that private information was reaching his sons. "We do not yet know whether Martin was personally responsible or whether someone else in his office disclosed it." Colleen nodded. She had every reason to suspect everyone connected to Sydney and Edwin, but suspicion was not proof. That distinction mattered to her. It is one of the reasons I believe Colleen's response carried more weight than simple revenge. She was surrounded by people who had justified dishonesty because it served their interests. She refused to become like them, even when anger would have made it easy. Mitchell continued. The protected account belonged under Colleen's control. The insurance policies were valid. Floyd had documented the mortgages, the movement of funds, the suspicious signatures, and the transactions connected to both sons. "If this evidence is referred to the appropriate authorities," Mitchell said carefully, "Sydney and Edwin could face serious civil and criminal consequences. I cannot predict what any agency, prosecutor, or court would decide, but the documentation is substantial." Colleen looked at the folders. "And if I choose not to report it?" "The evidence remains available if they challenge the estate or attempt to pressure you." "What do they inherit under the final will?" "Whatever you decide." The answer sounded simple, but it placed an enormous weight in her hands. She could give them nothing. She could allow the evidence to move forward immediately, or she could offer them the very properties they had tried to seize. "The house and the lake property," Colleen said. "They carry approximately $2 million in debt?" "Yes." "And together they are worth less than that?" "Based on the current valuations, yes." What happens if ownership is transferred to Sydney and Edwin? They would receive the properties subject to the disclosed mortgages and liens. They would need to work with the lenders, refinance, assume the obligations if permitted, sell, or face the consequences provided under the loan agreements. Could they claim I trapped them? Not if everything is fully disclosed. They are represented by independent counsel, and they sign knowingly. Colleen rose and walked toward the window. Below, people crossed the street carrying coffee and shopping bags. Their lives looked ordinary. She wondered whether they understood how quickly a family could turn a familiar home into a battlefield. Mitchell waited. "You can keep everything," he reminded her. "Floyd gave you that right." "I know. You can also walk away from his sons completely." "I know that too." "Then why give them the properties?" Colleen turned back toward him. "Because those are the things they chose over their father." Her voice was steady, but there was grief beneath it. They were absent when he needed them. Then they became interested when they thought his death would make them wealthy. They tried to remove me from the house before I had even finished mourning him. She placed Floyd's letter on the desk. "They keep saying they want what their father intended for them. I think they should receive exactly what their choices created." Mitchell studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I will prepare the documents with complete disclosure." That same afternoon, Sydney called. His voice had lost the calm authority he used in Floyd's office. "Colleen, we need to meet immediately. Someone from Mitchell and Associates is claiming there is another will." "That sounds important." "We believe someone may be trying to manipulate you." Only days earlier, Sydney had insisted she sign quickly. Now he was warning her not to sign anything. Fear had reversed the deadline. The meeting took place the next morning in Martin Morrison's conference room. Sydney and Edwin sat together on one side of the long mahogany table. Bianca sat beside Edwin, twisting a tissue between her fingers. Martin occupied the head of the table, visibly uncomfortable. James Mitchell sat beside Colleen with a briefcase at his feet. Sydney began before anyone else could speak. "This situation has become unnecessarily confusing. We are concerned that strangers are using Colleen's grief to interfere with Dad's established wishes." Mitchell placed a certified copy of the final will on the table. "The execution date is clear." Martin picked it up. As he read, his expression changed. "Floyd never informed me that he had retained another firm." "That was intentional," Colleen said. Martin looked at her. "Why?" "Because he no longer trusted the confidentiality of your office." The room fell silent. Sydney leaned forward. "That is ridiculous. Dad trusted Martin. Then why did private details about his estate repeatedly reach you before he discussed them with you?" Sydney's jaw tightened. Colleen opened Floyd's letter. "He hired an investigator 8 months before he died." Edwin looked toward his brother. Mitchell removed the first set of records from his briefcase. He laid out loan documents, account statements, communication records, and copies of signatures Floyd had disputed. Sydney's confidence began to crack. "I have never seen those before." "Then you will have an opportunity to explain them through the proper process," Mitchell said. A second folder was placed before Edwin. It contained records connected to his consulting business and transfers involving client funds. "This is intimidation," Edwin said. "No," Mitchell answered. "It is documentation." Bianca stared at her husband. "You told me the business was recovering." Edwin did not look at her. Sydney shifted tactics. "Colleen, whatever mistakes may have been made, we are still family." Colleen felt something inside her settle. "Were we family when you gave me 30 days to leave my home?" "We were following the will we had." "The will you were rushing me to accept before I could seek independent advice?" "We were trying to avoid conflict. You tried to make me responsible for $180,000 in medical bills." "That information came from the estate records," Edwin said. "I contacted the hospital." His face changed. The actual unpaid balance was far lower. Some amounts had already been paid, and others were presented to me inaccurately. Martin turned toward the brothers. "Is that true?" Neither answered. Mitchell placed the final will in front of Colleen. "Under this document, Mrs. Whitaker controls the estate and determines whether either son receives any gift." Sydney stared at her. "So you are keeping everything?" "No," Colleen said. "I am giving you what you asked for." She removed the gift deed from her purse and slid it across the table. Sydney took it first. The opening language transferred the Sacramento house and the Lake Tahoe property jointly to him and Edwin. For one brief moment, Edwin looked relieved. "You're giving us both properties?" "Yes," Sydney continued reading. Their attorney leaned closer. Then he reached the sentence near the bottom of the second page. He stopped. His fingers tightened around the paper. The color disappeared from his face. The room became so quiet that Colleen could hear the faint ticking of the clock behind Martin's chair. The sentence stated that the recipients accepted ownership subject to every existing mortgage, lien, repayment obligation, deficiency, and related liability, all of which had been fully disclosed and reviewed with independent counsel. The lawyer read it again. Then he looked at Sydney. "Do you understand what you would be accepting?" Sydney grabbed the document. "The house carries a mortgage?" "Approximately $1.2 million, Mitchell replied. "And the lake property?" "Approximately $800,000. That is $2 million. Yes. They are not worth that much." "No." Sydney stared at Colleen. "You knew. I knew you wanted them. This is a trap." "No. A trap hides its danger. Every debt is written in front of you." Edwin looked sick. "What happens if we refuse?" "Then you receive nothing," Mitchell said. "Mrs. Whitaker also reserves the right to provide the documented evidence to the appropriate authorities." Bianca began crying. "This will destroy us." Colleen looked at her. "The document did not create your problems. It only prevents you from placing them on me." Sydney leaned back in his chair. "What do you want?" "You will accept the inheritance you demanded or walk away from it. You will release all claims against the protected accounts, insurance proceeds, and remaining estate. Any future communication with me will go through attorneys." Sydney looked toward his lawyer. The lawyer did not tell him to sign. He explained the risks, the disclosures, and the need to consider the alternatives carefully. The mortgages were real. The evidence was extensive. The final will was valid. For the first time, the brothers were being asked to carry the full weight of their own decisions. They requested a private discussion. Colleen waited in the hallway with Mitchell. Only then did her hands begin to tremble. "I thought this moment would feel different," she admitted. "How did you expect it to feel?" "Like victory." "And what does it feel like?" "Like something has finally ended." 20 minutes later, they returned to the room. Sydney and Edwin signed. As Sydney reached the doorway, he turned back. "This is not over, Colleen." She met his eyes without anger. "Yes," she said, "it is completely over." And in that moment, Colleen did not feel like a widow who had defeated two greedy heirs. She felt like a woman who had finally taken ownership of her own life. When Colleen walked out of that conference room, the battle was over. But learning how to live without fear would take far longer than signing her name. 3 months later, Sydney filed for bankruptcy. The inheritance he had counted on could not rescue him, and the creditors who had waited patiently for Floyd's estate began demanding answers. He entered treatment for gambling addiction under court supervision, not because Colleen wanted to humiliate him, but because his choices had finally become impossible to hide. Edwin's consulting business collapsed soon afterward. Several former clients pursued claims involving money they believed had been mishandled. He moved into a smaller apartment and took a night job at a hotel near the airport. Bianca filed for divorce and left for Los Angeles. It would be easy to call that justice and celebrate every loss. I cannot. I'm at when family breaks one, and I believe consequences matter, but suffering alone is not a moral victory. The point was never that Sydney and Edwin deserved misery. The point was that, for the first time, they could no longer force someone else to carry the cost of their decisions. Colleen did not create their debts. She stopped absorbing them. With Mitchell's help, the properties and remaining obligations were handled through lawful financial procedures. Colleen's protected accounts and insurance proceeds gave her security, but security was not the same as peace. She purchased a cottage in Carmel overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The house was smaller than the Sacramento home, and the garden had been neglected for years. Rose branches had grown into one another. Weeds covered the paths. The soil near the fence had hardened. Colleen loved it immediately. Each morning, she carried coffee into the garden and listened to the waves beyond the fog. No one was waiting for her to solve a crisis. No one had left documents on the table. No one expected her to organize her day around their needs. At first, that freedom felt almost uncomfortable. For 22 years, she had been Floyd's wife, the manager of his household, the person who remembered appointments, hosted clients, and kept family traditions alive. She had loved him deeply and completely. But somewhere along the way, her own identity had become difficult to separate from the people she served. So she began with the roses. She cut away dead branches and cleared space around roots that still had life in them. Some plants recovered, others did not. Slowly, she learned that saving what could grow did not require preserving everything that had once existed. That lesson reached beyond the garden. She joined a local gardening club, enrolled in watercolor classes at the community college, and volunteered at an animal shelter. She painted badly and laughed at herself. She made friends who did not know the Whitaker name and had no interest in the estate. Then, one afternoon, a young woman named Sarah Mitchell stopped beside Colleen's gate. She was James Mitchell's daughter and worked with people experiencing financial and emotional abuse inside families. Sarah told her about widows pressured into signing property transfers, older parents whose savings had been taken by adult children, and spouses denied access to their own accounts. Many of them do not recognize what is happening, Sarah said. The person controlling the money keeps calling it help. That sentence stayed with Colleen. Financial abuse does not always arrive looking dangerous. Sometimes it sounds considerate. Let me handle the paperwork. You do not understand these accounts. Sign now, and I will make everything easier. We are family. You should trust me. Those words are not proof by themselves, but when they are joined by secrecy, pressure, isolation, or fear, they deserve careful attention. Colleen began volunteering with Sarah. Months later, she established the Floyd Whitaker Foundation for Financial Justice, offering financial education, independent legal referrals, and support for people being exploited by relatives. Her guiding rule was simple: no one should be pushed into a permanent financial decision while grieving, frightened, or dependent on the person demanding the signature. And that, to me, was Colleen's real inheritance. It was not the money, the house, or the power to decide what Floyd's sons received. It was the knowledge that her judgment still belonged to her. Sydney and Edwin believed power came from controlling information. Colleen learned that power also comes from slowing down, asking questions, and refusing to let another person's urgency replace your own understanding. What would you have done in her place? Would you have given them nothing, turned over every document immediately, or offered them exactly what they demanded? Share your answer in the comments, and remember this: genuine family does not require you to become powerless in order to prove your love. Fun kit. What stays with me most about Colleen's story is not the amount of money Floyd protected, or the moment Sydney and Edwin finally understood what they had accepted. It is the quiet transformation of a woman who had been taught to measure her worth through service to other people. For 22 years, Colleen had been a devoted wife, a caregiver, and the person who held the family together. Yet the moment Floyd died, his sons treated her loyalty as if it had never existed. They expected grief to make her confused, urgency to make her obedient, and the word family to make her surrender without asking questions. But Colleen did not win because she shouted louder than they did. She won because she slowed down. She listened to her instincts. She sought independent information. She read the documents, verified the debts, and refused to let another person's confidence replace her own judgment. I believe that is the deepest lesson in this story. Manipulation often depends on speed. The person applying pressure wants us to believe that we must decide immediately, that asking questions is selfish, or that seeking outside help is an act of betrayal. Colleen's strength began when she stopped accepting those false choices. Her final decision was not simply an act of revenge. She did not invent debts, hide obligations, or take what belonged to someone else. She allowed Sydney and Edwin to face the consequences attached to the very assets they had demanded. More importantly, she refused to continue carrying the emotional and financial cost of their behavior. In the end, Colleen's greatest inheritance was not the protected account, the insurance money, or even the legal authority Floyd left her. It was the knowledge that her voice still mattered. Her age did not make her helpless. Her grief did not erase her intelligence. Her love for the family did not require her to accept abuse. And when she used her experience to help other victims of financial manipulation, she transformed a painful betrayal into something that could protect others. That is where her story became more than a satisfying family drama. It became a reminder that surviving injustice is powerful, but turning that survival into wisdom may be even more meaningful. The lesson we can apply today is simple. Never make a permanent decision under unnecessary pressure. Ask for time. Read every document. Verify financial claims independently. Keep copies of important records. Speak with a qualified professional who is not controlled by the person pressuring you. Most importantly, remember that healthy love does not demand ignorance, fear, or unquestioning obedience. In your opinion, should Colleen have given the brothers the indebted properties, or should she have given them nothing? Please share your answer in the comments so everyone can read and consider different perspectives. And subscribe to @WhenFamilyBreaks1 to support the channel and help us continue creating meaningful stories about family, betrayal, healing, and the choices that reveal who people truly are.